Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales and boundless imagination come to life. Enjoy the story and don't forget to subscribe. Laser blasts sizzled past Carl Knight's head as he sprinted through the grimy maintenance corridors of Targon V's lower docks. The fake precursor artifact clutched against his chest burned cold through his jacket, probably worth less than the scrap metal it was made from, but try telling that to the angry creditors behind him. "You can't run forever, Knight," the gravelly voice of Borch the Collector echoed off the metal walls. "I've got people at every exit." Carl skidded around a corner, his boots leaving black marks on the deck plating. "That's what you think, old man." He slapped the control panel of a maintenance hatch, diving through just as it hissed shut behind him. The satisfying thunk of bolt locks engaging brought a grin to his face. The smile didn't last long. Warning lights flashed across his wrist computer, reminding him that his ship, the Lucky Break, was running on fumes and prayer. The life support system flickered between yellow and red status. "Not good. Computer, how long till total system failure?" "Approximately 18 minutes at current usage rates," the AI replied in its perpetually bored tone. "Though the port engine might explode before that. Would you like me to calculate those odds as well? Just get us ready for emergency launch." Carl slammed into the pilot's seat, his fingers dancing across the controls. The engine coughed to life with a concerning rattle. Through the viewport, he could see Borch's thugs emerging onto the landing pad, their weapons drawn. "Time to go." He yanked back on the controls, and the Lucky Break lurched upward, pieces of hull plating rattling loose. "Warning," the computer droned. "Multiple system failures imminent. Recommend immediate." "Shut up and give me everything we've got." Carl punched in random coordinates. "Emergency jump, now." The stars stretched into lines as the jump drive engaged. The ship shuddered violently, and Carl's stomach lurched as reality twisted around them. A moment later, they burst back into normal space, directly in front of the most impressive space station Carl had ever seen. It hung in space like a massive crystal flower, its purple-tinted spires reaching out in elegant curves. Hundreds of ships moved in precise patterns around it, most of them bearing the distinctive designs of the Terranium Empire. Oh, hell. Carl's blood ran cold. He'd jumped right into the heart of the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. "Computer, get us out of here." "Jump drive offline," the AI replied cheerfully. "Also, we're being hailed." A stern, feminine voice filled the cockpit. "Unidentified vessel, you have entered restricted diplomatic space. Prepare for scanning and identification." Carl's hand instinctively went to the military badge his old friend, Zara, had given him in that bar on Nar Shaddaa. His lucky charm that was supposed to help him avoid situations exactly like this. As the scan swept over his ship, he could only pray it wouldn't get him executed on the spot. The voice returned, but now it was filled with warmth and respect. "Commander Grant Knight. Our deepest apologies, we weren't expecting the Thunder Eagle's arrival for another cycle. Welcome to Tyrum Prime Diplomatic Station. Please proceed to Docking Bay Alpha 1 for your honored reception." Carl blinked. What? Please repeat your last transmission." "We're experiencing some interference," the voice prompted. Carl stared at the military badge, its surface catching the purple light from the station. The worn metal showed an eagle wrapped in lightning, identical to the symbols on the sleek military vessels patrolling nearby. His mind raced. Death by angry creditors, or taking a chance on, whatever this was. "Apologies," he said, deepening his voice slightly. "My ship sustained some classified damage during my last mission." Docking Bay Alpha 1 confirmed. The Lucky Break limped toward the indicated bay, trailing a thin line of coolant. As they approached, Carl got his first close look at Terranium architecture. Everything seemed to be built from some kind of crystalline material that shifted colors in the starlight. "Computer, quick search on Thunder Eagle and Commander Grant Knight. Searching. Commander Grant Knight, legendary Terranium fleet strategist, hero of the Battle of Seven Suns, master diplomat, and yes, I get it. I'm impersonating someone way out of my league. Carl straightened his jacket, trying to brush off the worst of the scorch marks. Any tips on Terranium military protocol? Downloading basic etiquette guide. Warning, attempting to impersonate a Terranium military officer is punishable by. Just tell me how to stand and salute. The docking procedure was surprisingly smooth, given his ship's condition. As the airlock cycled, Carl took several deep breaths, squaring his shoulders the way the computer had shown him. The door hissed open. He nearly stumbled. The welcoming committee was impressive. A full honor guard in crystalline armor, and at their head. Carl's breath caught. The most striking woman he'd ever seen. She stood tall and proud, her purple skin seeming to glow from within. Her formal military uniform hugged curves that would make a galaxy spiral, but it was her eyes that caught him, deep violet with flecks of silver, studying him with an intensity that made him want to confess everything right there. Commander Knight, she said, her voice musical but authoritative. I am Lieutenant Heiress of the Terranium Guard. Welcome to our humble station. Carl managed what he hoped was a proper salute. The honor is mine, Lieutenant. He wasn't even lying about that part. A slight frown crossed her perfect features. Your ship appears different from our records. Classified modifications, Carl said quickly. For a special undercover operation, of course. Was that amusement in her eyes, though? I must say, your approach to stealth is unique. We tracked your entry from 3 sectors away. Carl felt sweat bead on his forehead. Sometimes the best way to hide is to be obvious about it. To his surprise, she laughed, a sound like crystal wind chimes. How refreshingly unconventional. The stories of your unusual tactics clearly weren't exaggerated. She gestured to the honor guard. Please, your quarters have been prepared. Though perhaps you'd like to freshen up first. That obvious, huh? Let's just say that battle damage has a distinctive aroma. She fell into step beside him as they walked through the station's sweeping corridors. I must admit, you're not quite what I expected, Commander. Oh, Carl tried to match her precise stride while taking in his surroundings. Everything was purple-tinted crystal and flowing curves, with occasional splashes of gold and silver. Station personnel, all with various shades of purple skin, stopped to salute as they passed. The reports describe you as more rigid, traditional. Her sideways glance held that same hint of amusement, yet you seem almost relaxed. War changes a man, Carl said sagely, having absolutely no idea what he was talking about. Makes you appreciate a more flexible approach to command. They reached what had to be the VIP section of the station. The door to his quarters swept open to reveal a suite that made his usual hideouts look like cargo holds. Crystal sculptures caught the light, and the viewport offered a stunning view of the nearby nebula. The diplomatic reception begins in 3 hours, Eris said. I'll have someone bring you a proper uniform. She paused, those incredible eyes studying him again. I look forward to hearing more about your flexible approaches, Commander. After she left, Carl collapsed onto a couch that probably cost more than everything he'd ever owned. Computer, what exactly have I gotten myself into? Based on current factors, either a remarkably fortuitous con, or your imminent execution. Would you like me to calculate the odds? Just help me figure out how to act like a legendary commander for one night. He stared at his reflection in the crystalline wall. How hard can it be? The diplomatic uniform they brought him was a masterpiece of military tailoring. Deep purple with gold trim that seemed to catch impossible light, complete with an array of metals Carl couldn't begin to identify. He was adjusting the collar when a soft chime announced a visitor. A young Terranium officer entered, looking nervous. Commander Knight, I've been sent to brief you on tonight's protocols. He hesitated. And, there's something you should know about Emperor Valak. Karl's stomach dropped. The Emperor? Yes, sir. He's been asking about you all day. You see, he and the Thunder Eagle, I mean, you and His Majesty, were close friends, years ago. The Emperor hasn't seen you, I mean, Commander Knight, in 7 years. He's been quite excited about the reunion. The officer shifted uncomfortably. He speaks often of your shared battles and strategy sessions. I should also warn you that His Majesty's vision has unfortunately deteriorated. He sees quite poorly now. Karl sank into a chair, his mind racing. 7 years, you say? Yes, sir. The Emperor mentions the Battle of 7 Suns frequently. He says it was the last time you died together. The young officer straightened. He's been telling everyone how much he looks forward to reminiscing about old times. Wonderful, Karl muttered. Just what he needed. An emperor expecting to relive war stories with his old friend. Is there anything else I should know? The reception will begin with formal introductions, followed by dinner and strategic discussions regarding the pirate clans in the Outer Rim. The Emperor has specifically requested your input on the matter. Of course, he has. Karl stood, squaring his shoulders. Well, better not keep him waiting. The grand reception hall put the rest of the station to shame. Crystalline chandeliers floated without visible support, casting rainbow refractions across the gathered dignitaries. Karl recognized representatives from at least a dozen major civilizations, all mixing with the purple-skinned Terranium elite. Commander Knight. Eris appeared at his elbow, wearing a formal dress uniform that somehow managed to be both perfectly proper and devastatingly attractive. Allow me to escort you to His Majesty. Emperor Valak stood at the head of the hall, an imposing figure despite his advanced age. His purple skin had a silvery sheen, and his eyes held the wisdom of centuries. When he turned toward Karl, his face lit up with genuine warmth. Grant. My old friend. 7 years is far too long. Karl stepped forward, his heart pounding. He bowed deeply, buying precious seconds to think. Your Majesty, the years have been kind to you. Valak laughed, pulling Karl into an unexpected embrace. Always so formal, Knight. Do you remember what you said to me after the Battle of 7 Suns? Oh. Karl tried to recall anything about this fake, Commander Grant Knight. Valak, you old star dragon, your strategy was either brilliant or insane, and I'm still not sure which. Karl forced a laugh. How could I forget? Though your moves that day proved it was definitely brilliance. The Emperor's eyes twinkled. And do you remember what happened after, in the officers' mess, when you tried to demonstrate the maneuver using soup bowls? Ah, crap. Karl glanced at Eris, who was watching the exchange with intense interest. Some memories of that evening are hazier than others. Valak roared with laughter. The drink was flowing freely that night. But your tactical genius showed through even then. Speaking of which, he gestured to a nearby table laden with strategic displays. I'm eager to hear your thoughts on our current situation with the pirates. As they moved toward the displays, Karl caught Eris studying him with those mesmerizing eyes. There was something in her expression, curiosity, suspicion. Before he could analyze it further, she stepped closer. Commander, she said softly, perhaps you'd care to dance. The strategic discussions can wait a moment. Karl glanced at the Emperor, who nodded encouragingly. Go. We have all evening to talk tactics. Enjoy yourself, old friend. The music was unlike anything Karl had heard before, crystalline tones that seemed to flow through the air like liquid light. Eris moved with natural grace, and he did his best to follow her lead without being too obvious about it. You handle yourself well for a military man, she murmured. Full of surprises, aren't I? Indeed. She drew slightly closer. Tell me, Commander, What really brought you to our station today? Carl's pulse quickened. Would you believe a random navigational error in a ship that looks like it's been through an asteroid demolition derby? Her lips curved in a subtle smile. How fascinating. The music shifted, and she guided them toward a quieter corner of the hall. I have something for you, Commander. She produced an ornate crystalline box, its surface etched with intricate patterns. A small token of appreciation for your unexpected arrival. Carl accepted the box carefully. You're too kind, Lieutenant. Oh, I insist. Was that a mischievous glint in her eye? Be sure to open it later, in private. It's something of a traditional gesture. Before Carl could respond, the Emperor's voice boomed across the hall. Come, Grant. You must tell everyone about that brilliant flanking maneuver you used at Centauri Prime. Duty calls, Eris said with a slight bow. Don't forget about the box, Commander. I look forward to discussing its contents, very soon. Hours later, Carl collapsed onto the couch in his quarters, loosening the uniform's collar. He'd somehow survived an evening of vague tactical discussions, carefully deflected war stories, and what he was pretty sure were several thinly veiled threats from various diplomats. The crystalline box sat on the table, catching the light from the nebula outside. Well, he said to the empty room, might as well see what kind of trouble this is. He opened the box carefully. Inside was a single document, written in flowing Terranium script. As his eyes scanned the text, translated automatically by his neural implant, the blood drained from his face. Computer, he choked. Please tell me this isn't what I think it is. Analyzing, results indicate the document is a legally binding Terranium marriage contract. According to local custom, acceptance is implied by receiving the gift. Congratulations, Commander Knight. You're engaged. Engaged? Carl spluttered, staring at the glowing words on his wrist display. To who? The computer remained infuriatingly calm. Analysis incomplete. The document specifies a partner within the Terranium Empire. Further data required for identification. Carl paced the opulent suite, his mind a whirlwind of panicked calculations. Marriage? He could barely keep his ship afloat, let alone manage a relationship with someone from the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. And what if this traditional gesture was a trap? Computer, can we just undo this? Like, declare a mistranslation or something? Terranium marriage contracts are considered inviolable. Attempting to nullify one without due cause could be interpreted as an act of war. Great. Carl rubbed his temples. So, what constitutes due cause in this case? Historically, proving the intended spouse is a known criminal, a heretic, or violently allergic to crystal sculptures. Carl glanced around the room at the shimmering artwork. Scratch that last one. Okay, new plan. We find a way out of this mess without starting an interstellar incident. He paused. And find out who set me up. He started with the most obvious suspect. Eris. The gift, the suggestive glances, it all pointed to her. But why? He activated the comm system. Lieutenant Eris, this is Commander Knight. I request an immediate meeting. Her voice was cool, professional. Commander? Is something amiss? I thought you might be occupied. I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Very well. I'll be there shortly. Carl spent the next few minutes trying to calm his racing pulse. He needed to project an image of calm authority, not panicked desperation. He straightened his uniform, smoothed his hair, and mentally rehearsed a dozen different approaches. Eris arrived precisely on schedule. She wore a simple, elegant dress, but her eyes held a sharp, assessing glint that put Carl on edge. Commander, she greeted him, her voice neutral. What seems to be the problem? The gift, Carl said, choosing his words carefully. I'm afraid there's been a slight misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. I assure you, the contract is quite clear. But I never agreed to anything. Accepting the gift implies consent under Terranium law. A tradition honored for centuries. A tradition that conveniently traps unsuspecting visitors, Carl muttered. Are you implying that I deliberately misled you, Commander? Her voice hardened, but there was a flicker of something else beneath the surface, something Carl couldn't quite decipher. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking you directly, did you know what was in that box? She hesitated for a moment, then met his gaze head-on. Yes. Carl's jaw clenched. Why? Because, Commander, the Terranium Empire needs you. He stared at her, dumbfounded. Needs me? I'm a con artist fleeing angry creditors. I'm not exactly vital to interstellar politics. You underestimate yourself, Commander. Or perhaps, you underestimate the chaos within the Empire. She walked to the viewport, gazing out at the nebula. Emperor Valak is not getting younger. The succession is uncertain. Factions are vying for power. The Empire is on the brink of civil war. Carl frowned. And how does me getting married fit into all this? You are a legendary hero, a brilliant strategist, and a trusted friend of the Emperor. Your presence strengthens his position. Your marriage, it would solidify alliances, quell dissent, and buy us time. Buy you time? For what? To choose a successor who will lead the Empire with wisdom and strength, not greed and ambition. Carl felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. He wasn't just a pawn in a political game, he was a keystone. So, who am I supposed to marry? Some powerful noble? A scheming politician? Eris turned back to him, her expression unreadable. That is, complicated. Complicated how? Before she could answer, the comm system chimed again. Commander Knight, you are requested to attend an urgent meeting in the Emperor's strategic war room. The matter concerns the recent pirate attacks in the Outer Rim. Eris sighed. Duty calls. We'll have to continue this conversation later, Commander. She paused at the door, her eyes meeting his once more. Just, try not to start a war while I'm gone. The Emperor's strategic war room was a high-tech marvel, filled with holographic displays and tactical projections. Several high-ranking Terranium officers were already gathered around a central table, their faces grim. Valak sat at the head, his silver eyes narrowed in concentration. Ah, Grant, you're here. Excellent. The Emperor gestured to an empty chair. We have a problem. The Krell pirates have been growing bolder, raiding our supply lines and terrorizing our colonies. They're led by a particularly ruthless warlord known as Krill. Carl studied the holographic displays, trying to look like he knew what he was doing. What are our current strategies? We've deployed several fleets to the Outer Rim, one of the officers said. But the pirates are elusive. They strike quickly and disappear into the asteroid fields. They're also well-funded, another officer added. Someone is supplying them with advanced weaponry and intel. The Emperor turned to Carl, his gaze intense. I need your assessment, Grant. What would you do? Carl hesitated. He had no military training, no knowledge of Terranium tactics, and no idea who Krill was or where the Outer Rim even was. But he couldn't admit that. He had to bluff his way through this. The key to defeating any enemy is understanding their weaknesses, Carl began, channeling his inner military genius. We need to find out who is funding the pirates and cut off their supply lines. We also need to exploit their vulnerabilities. Are they overconfident? Are they predictable? The officers exchanged glances, impressed by his apparent insight. The Emperor nodded slowly. Good points, Grant. But how do we find those vulnerabilities? Carl thought for a moment, recalling his own experiences as a smuggler and con artist. You need someone who can infiltrate their ranks, someone who can gain their trust. Someone who can play their game. An undercover operative. The Emperor stroked his chin thoughtfully. Risky, but it might work. Do you have someone in mind? Carl swallowed hard. He was about to suggest someone else to risk their life, but the Emperor's gaze was unwavering. He saw something in Valak's eyes that mirrored his own desperation. An unspoken deal was forming between them. I might know someone, Carl said, forcing a confident tone. But it would require resources, discretion, and a very convincing cover story. The Emperor smiled. Consider it done, Grant. I trust you'll choose wisely. As the meeting adjourned, Eris approached Carl, her expression unreadable. Impressive performance, Commander. You almost sounded like you knew what you were talking about. Just doing my duty, Lieutenant, Carl said, trying to sound nonchalant. So, about that marriage contract. Later, Commander. I have to brief the fleet commanders on your innovative strategy. She turned to leave, then paused. And be careful who you trust, Commander. Not everyone in this room is on your side. Carl watched her go, his mind racing. Political intrigue, pirate warlords, and a forced marriage, he was way out of his depth. And he had a sinking feeling that things were about to get a whole lot worse. Back in his quarters, Carl tried to contact Zara, his mechanic friend. Computer, establish a secure comm line to Zara Kesh on Nar Shada. Attempting to connect, connection established. Zara's image flickered onto the screen, her brow furrowed in concern. Carl. What's going on? I heard rumors you were running from Borch. I tried to reach you, but it was like you had fallen off the face of the galaxy. Are you okay? I'm complicated, Carl admitted. Long story short, I'm stuck in the Terranium Empire, impersonating a war hero, and engaged to someone I've never met. Zara stared at him, speechless. Then she burst out laughing. You. Engaged? That's the best joke I've heard all week. It's not a joke, Zara. I need your help. I need you to find out everything you can about Commander Grant Knight. His past, his enemies, his romantic interests. Romantic interests. Oh, this is getting better and better, Zara chuckled. All right, I'll see what I can dig up. But this is going to cost you, Carl. Big time. Name your price. Just get me the information I need. And Zara, be careful. This is bigger than I thought. As Zara's image faded from the screen, Carl stared out at the nebula, his mind filled with uncertainty. He was trapped in a web of political intrigue, surrounded by enemies he couldn't identify, and about to be married to someone he didn't know. He had no idea what he was doing, but one thing was certain, he had to find a way out of this mess, before it destroyed him. The weight of the marriage contract settled on Carl like a physical burden. He barely slept, tossing and turning on the luxurious bed, haunted by images of purple-skinned dignitaries and the looming threat of political entanglement. He needed to get off this station, and fast. He started formulating a plan, going over every detail in his mind. He needed a ship, a route, and a distraction. Preferably one that didn't involve starting an interstellar war. The next morning, Carl attended the daily briefing with the Emperor. The mood in the war room was tense. Reports of pirate attacks were escalating, and the Terranium fleet seemed unable to contain them. Commander Knight, Valak said, his voice grave. Have you made any progress on your plan to infiltrate the Krell pirates? Carl nodded, trying to look confident. I have, Your Majesty. I've identified a potential contact, a smuggler named Jax who operates in the Outer Rim. He's known to deal with the Krell. Excellent, the Emperor said. Arrange a meeting. Use whatever resources you need. There's one small issue, Your Majesty, Carl continued. Jax only trusts individuals who can prove their loyalty. He requires a demonstration of, shall we say, extreme discretion. Valak raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? He wants me to steal something from the Terranium Empire, Carl said, choosing his words carefully. Something valuable. To prove I'm willing to betray my own people. A murmur of outrage rippled through the room. The Emperor held up a hand, silencing the protests. What did you have in mind, Commander? Valak asked, his eyes narrowed. Carl took a deep breath. The Aegis Core. It's a prototype energy weapon, stored in a research facility on level 7. Stealing it would send a clear message to Jax, and to the Krell. The Emperor was silent for a long moment, considering the proposal. A dangerous gamble, Grant. But it might be worth the risk. Very well. I authorize you to proceed. But be warned, Commander. If you betray me, there will be consequences. I understand, Your Majesty, Carl said, trying to hide his relief. With the Emperor's approval, Carl began putting his plan into motion. He needed help, someone who knew the station inside and out. He thought of Zara, but contacting her again would be too risky. He needed someone local, someone he could trust. He thought of the young officer who had briefed him on the Emperor's eccentricities, the one who had seemed genuinely nervous about Carl's arrival. What was his name? Timur. Carl summoned Timur to his quarters. The young officer arrived promptly, looking even more anxious than before. Commander Knight, you requested my presence. Yes, Timur. I need your help with a sensitive operation. Timur's eyes widened. An operation? What kind of operation, sir? I need you to help me steal something, Carl said, watching Timur's reaction closely. The Aegis Core. Timur stared at him, dumbfounded. The Aegis Core? But that's impossible. It's guarded by the best security in the Empire. That's why I need your help, Carl said. You know the station, you know the security protocols. I need you to help me navigate the research facility and disable the alarms. Timur hesitated, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. But that's treason. I could be executed. Or, Carl countered, you could help me save the Empire. The Krell pirates are a growing threat. If we can infiltrate their ranks and cut off their supply lines, we can end this war before it destroys us all. Timur looked at him, his eyes filled with doubt and fear. I don't know, Commander. This is too much. Carl sighed. He'd hoped Timur would be more willing to help. Think about it, Timur. I'm not asking you to betray your empire. I'm asking you to save it. Timur left, his face still etched with uncertainty. Carl wasn't sure if he'd convinced him, but he had to try. He didn't have any other options. That evening, Carl received a coded message from Timur. Meet me in Sector 4, Maintenance Level Gamma. Midnight. Carl felt a surge of hope. It seemed Timur had decided to take the risk. He gathered his gear, a few stolen weapons, and a neural disruptor he'd borrowed from the armory. He met Timur in the dimly lit maintenance corridor. Are you ready? Carl asked. Timur nodded, his face pale. I've disabled the security cameras in this sector. But the Aegis Core is protected by a laser grid and a biometric scanner. We'll need to bypass those. I have a plan for that, Carl said, pulling out the neural disruptor. They moved through the maintenance corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Timur led the way, his knowledge of the station proving invaluable. They reached the entrance to the research facility. This is it, Timur whispered. The laser grid is just inside. I've rerouted the power, but it'll only stay offline for a few minutes. Carl nodded. He activated the neural disruptor and aimed it at the control panel. The device emitted a high-pitched whine, and the laser grid flickered and died. They slipped through the entrance and into the research facility. The Aegis core was housed in a heavily reinforced chamber, protected by a biometric scanner. "This is where it gets tricky," Timur said. "The scanner requires a DNA sample from a high-ranking scientist. We can't bypass it." Carl thought for a moment. He remembered Eris mentioning that the Emperor was a close friend of Commander Grant Knight. "Maybe. I have an idea," Carl said. "Can you access the station's medical database?" Timur nodded. "I can try." He accessed the database and searched for Commander Grant Knight's medical records. He found a DNA sample on file. "This might work," Timur said. "I can replicate the DNA signature and feed it to the scanner." He worked quickly, manipulating the data and uploading it to a small device. He attached the device to the biometric scanner. "Stand back," Timur said. "This could overload the system." He activated the device. The biometric scanner whirred, and the chamber door slid open. Carl and Timur rushed inside. The Aegis core was a massive, cylindrical device, humming with power. It was even more impressive than Carl had imagined. "Let's get out of here," Carl said, grabbing the Aegis core. They raced back through the research facility, their hearts pounding. They reached the maintenance corridors and made their way toward the docking bays. "Where are we going?" Timur asked. "To my ship," Carl said. "The Lucky Break is still in Docking Bay Alpha 1. I've rerouted the security cameras and disabled the alarms." They reached the docking bay and slipped aboard the Lucky Break. Carl fired up the engines and prepared for launch. "Are you sure about this, Commander?" Timur asked, his voice trembling. "There's no turning back now." "I'm sure," Carl said. "It's time to get off this station." He launched the Lucky Break and blasted out of the docking bay. As they cleared the station, alarms blared and Terranium fighters scrambled to intercept them. "We're being hailed," Timur said. "It's Lieutenant Eris." Carl hesitated. Should he answer? What would he say? He decided to take a chance. He opened the comm channel. "Eris," he said, trying to sound calm. "What can I do for you?" "Commander Knight," Eris said, her voice filled with anger and betrayal. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm leaving," Carl said. "This whole thing was a mistake. I'm not a hero, I'm not a diplomat, and I'm definitely not getting married." "You can't leave, Commander," Eris said. "You're making a terrible mistake." "Maybe," Carl said. "But it's my mistake to make." He cut the comm channel and engaged the jump drive. The stars stretched into lines, and the Lucky Break jumped into hyperspace. As they hurtled through the void, Carl turned to Timur. "Thank you, Timur. You helped me get out of there." "Where are we going?" Timur asked. "I don't know," Carl said. "But anywhere is better than here." Carl stared out at the swirling colors of hyperspace, the Aegis core secured in a hidden compartment. He was free of the Terranium Empire, but he was far from safe. He was now a fugitive, wanted for theft and treason, and he had no idea where to go. Timur sat nervously in the co-pilot seat, his eyes darting around the cockpit. "What now, Commander? Where do we go?" "I don't know," Carl admitted. "Somewhere the Terraniums can't find us. Somewhere we can lay low and figure out our next move." He plotted a course for the outer rim, toward the lawless fringes of the galaxy. It was a dangerous place, but it was also the best place to disappear. As they emerged from hyperspace, they found themselves near a desolate space station called the Dust Devil. It was a haven for smugglers, pirates, and other unsavory characters. "This is it," Carl said. "Our new home, for now." They docked at the Dust Devil and stepped out into the crowded spaceport. The air was thick with the smells of engine grease, cheap liquor, and desperation. "Stay close," Carl told Timur. "And keep your hand on your blaster." They made their way through the spaceport, dodging shady characters and ignoring the hawkers trying to sell them everything from illegal weapons to exotic pets. They found a dingy cantina called the Rusty Spanner and ordered a couple of drinks. "So," Carl said, taking a sip of the questionable liquid. "What are you going to do, Timur? You can't go back to the Terranium Empire." Timur sighed. "I don't know. I never planned for this. I just wanted to help you save the Empire." "You did help," Carl said. "You helped me escape. Now you need to think about what you want for yourself." I always wanted to be a pilot," Timur said. "But I never had the courage to leave the Empire." Carl smiled. "Well, now's your chance. I could use a good co-pilot. What do you say?" Timur's face lit up. "You mean it? You'd let me fly with you?" "Absolutely," Carl said. "But you need to understand something. This life isn't easy. It's dangerous, unpredictable, and often lonely." "I'm ready," Timur said, his voice filled with determination. "I'm ready for anything." Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He approached their table, his eyes fixed on Carl. "Carl Knight," the figure said, his voice low and gravelly. "I've been looking for you." Carl tensed, his hand reaching for his blaster. "Who are you?" The figure removed his hat, revealing a scarred face and cold, piercing eyes. "My name is Krill. And I believe you have something that belongs to me." Carl stared at him, his mind racing. Krill. The pirate warlord the Emperor had warned him about. How did he find him? "I don't know what you're talking about," Carl said, trying to sound nonchalant. Krill smiled, a cruel, predatory smile. "Don't play coy with me, Knight. I know you stole the Aegis core from the Terraniums. And I want it." "I don't have it," Carl said. "And even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you." Krill chuckled. "You don't have a choice, Knight. My men are waiting outside. You either give me the Aegis core, or you and your little friend die." Carl glanced at Timur, who was trembling with fear. He knew he was outmatched. He couldn't take on Krill and his men. "All right," Carl said, raising his hands in surrender. "You win. I'll give you the Aegis core." "Good," Krill said. "Take me to it." Carl led Krill and a group of his armed thugs to the lucky break. He opened the hidden compartment and revealed the Aegis core. Krill's eyes widened with greed. "Excellent. You've made the right choice, Knight." He reached for the Aegis core, but before he could grab it, Carl lunged forward, knocking him off balance. He grabbed the Aegis core and ran. "Get him!" Krill roared. Carl sprinted through the spaceport, dodging laser blasts and desperate to escape. He knew he couldn't outrun them forever. He needed a plan. He spotted a small, abandoned shuttle sitting on a nearby landing pad. He raced toward it, hoping it was still functional. He jumped inside the shuttle and frantically tried to start the engines. They sputtered to life, and the shuttle lurched forward. He blasted off the landing pad, narrowly avoiding a collision with a passing freighter. He steered the shuttle toward the outer rim, hoping to lose Krill and his men in the vast expanse of space. As he flew, he realized he had a choice to make. He could keep running, try to escape Krill and the Terraniums, and live a life on the run. Or he could face the consequences of his actions and try to fix the mess he had created. He thought of Eris, her face etched with disappointment and betrayal. He thought of the Emperor, his hopes for a peaceful succession dashed. He thought of Timur, who had risked everything to help him. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't run anymore. He had to go back to the Terranium Empire and try to make things right. He set a course for Tyrum Prime Diplomatic Station. He had no idea what awaited him there, but he knew he had to try. Back on Tyrum Prime Diplomatic Station, Eris stood in the war room, her face grim. Reports of Karl Knight's theft and escape had reached the Emperor, and he was furious. "Find him," Valak roared. "Bring him back here, dead or alive." Eris hesitated. She knew Karl had made a mistake, but she couldn't believe he was a traitor. There had to be a reason for his actions. "Your Majesty," she said. "With all due respect, I believe Commander Knight may have been acting under duress. Perhaps we should try to contact him, before we resort to force." The Emperor glared at her. "Duress? He stole the Aegis core and fled. What more evidence do you need?"